We're going to have some fun in this tutorial. We're going to work with delay and echo effects. If you want to follow along, go get these two files. The Four Voices spread is inside the working files demo files. Four Voices spread right there. And the Gettysburg one would be inside working files narrations right there. All right. We're going to work with three different effects. Go down to effects, delay and echo, and there are the three delay and echo effects. Analog delay, and echo. So there are two different delay effects and one echo effect. So let's just open up delay, and that will kind of set the stage for what's the difference between delay and echo. Here I've got a monaural file. We're going to start with that one and then go to a stereo in a second. So I just double click on this to open up the delay, and it looks pretty simple. Basically, the delay is how long does it take before you hear the delay. The default setting is 120 milliseconds, which is a little more than a tenth of a second. So you wait about a tenth of a second, and then you will hear the repeat. And then the mix and the dry says how much of the original do you want to hear and how much of the repeated one do you want to hear. And typically you want to hear more of the original and less of the repeat. So I'm going to say, let's have it be toward the dry end. Let's hear the original and then have the repeat be not quite so loud. So let me just play this one for you.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent.
So you can hear that there is one repeat. The delay gives you a chance to make one repeat, not multiple repeats. If I take this thing to its maximum level, which is 500 milliseconds or a half a second, you can hear the delay coming back at you.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent.
And then if I make it just wet, all you hear is the echo.
Our fathers brought forth.
So it's just the echo as opposed to the echo with the mix. And if it's dry, it's just the original.
Continent.
So something in the middle works for you like that.
Our fathers brought forth on this.
And so if it's right in the middle, it means that the echo or the delay is exactly the same volume level as the original sound. And that's basically how that works. There are a bunch of custom settings or presets, but in fact, your work here is so simple that you just make these decisions, kind of listen to it on your own and decide, what works. Because I think most of these guys, even when they have all these funny names and stuff, they really, don't do that much in terms of making something distinct. You just decide how much you want the delay to be and how much of the original versus the delayed version you want to come through. And keep in mind that right around 200 milliseconds or so is when you start hearing a distinct echo or a distinct delay.
Our fathers brought forth on this continent.
Something like that. All right, let's close that down and we'll go to the stereo side of things. Four Voices spread. I'm going to apply the delay to this one. Open that up. You can see it just has the extra complexity of having a left and a right channel, and that adds some interest. Notice how you can have different delays for the right and the left channels. That just kind of makes things sound just a little more interesting, a little bit more of a stereo feel here.
Just too hard to find.
See, that's a stereo channel, but those voices are dead center. So by having one delayed a little bit more than the other, then it starts to begin to feel like it's more of a stereo sound to it. And there are some presets here that you saw before, spatial echo, these other kinds of things, that basically just determine how much of the original versus the echo version do you want to come back out. So here it's mainly wet, but it's a little difference from one channel to the next. So that's how these guys work. Delay effect makes one echo. I'll just play this ending here so you can get a sense of how that works again.
Fine.
Now, if I make it a little bit longer, make them both longer, let's see how that last little phrase goes.
Fine.
So you can hear that guy coming back at the end. Let's close this guy down and move back over to the monaural channel, and we'll go take a look at the analog delay. If I leave these both on, it's just going to be a mess with each of these guys working against each other. So I just make sure I turn off the other delay and just work on analog delay. Analog delay is kind of an effect that's between delay and echo. And the reason for that is that it has this thing called feedback. What feedback does is it lets you gradually fade out the delay such that it plays once, but then it'll play again with a reduced volume level depending on what feedback level you choose. If you choose a feedback of 100, that means that the delay will be exactly equal in volume to the original and will keep on repeating at a 100% volume level, which, by the way, gets really loud after a while. So you got to be careful when you start venturing toward 100 when you do feedback. So I'll give you a sense of how this works. I'll put it down to around 25 here, and we'll play back this little clip.
Fourscore and 7 years ago.
And to hear really how it works, I'll just let it fade off at the end here.
Created equal.
So you kind of repeats a couple of times. I'll put it up to 50%. You get a chance to hear a little bit more there.
Created equal.
And you hear that it probably could have kept on going.
Created equal.
Probably, it could have gone past the ending there. And this happens a lot when you work with effects that have delays or echoes in them. You want the echo to really fade out, to decay properly, and you may not have enough room at the end of a file to do that. So if that's the case, just go to Insert Some Silence, and the Insert Silence command is inside the Edit menu. Edit, Insert Silence, and you can pick the amount of time you want to insert. Well, I'll just say we'll insert, let's say 5 seconds, like so. Click OK. That puts us 5 seconds of silence at the end. So now if I want the delay to continue, and I'll actually erase a little bit more to make it more obvious. And we'll kind of put these two guys in the middle to see how that works, and see how this works now.
All men are created equal.
So you can see that it decays, and it took several seconds to decay, so it's good to add the silence to allow that to happen. The other characteristic of the analog delay, as opposed to delay in addition to the feedback, is that you have this mode. The purpose of the analog delay is to try to emulate old vintage hardware delay devices, like a tape or tape and tube, and analog being newer than these other guys. And the emulation is, here we are digitally trying to emulate something that's not digital, so how well will that work? Well, I think tape and tape tube are very similar, and analog is more mid-range, kind of pushes out the mid-range. So I'm just going to play through this and click on these guys as you go through, and you determine whether you hear any differences. Let's get started with that. I'm going to reduce the feedback to something more manageable, like down here. Let's just see how that sounds. So I'm going to go tape, tape tube, and then analog.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty, and dedicated.
So I think you can see that analog is distinctly different than these two guys, but these two guys are very similar. I'm not sure that one or the other makes that much difference. There are a number of custom effects here that really do make a difference in this case, and they can be kind of loud and kind of pushing out at you, or like canyon echoes. If you look at it, you see that the dry out is 100 and the wet out is 50, so you get the original for sure and a lot of the echo, and the delay is almost a full second delay, and the feedback is pretty high. Let's hear how that sounds.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation.
So that canyon is pretty wide. It takes almost a second for you to hear your sound coming back at you. So the presets can be fun to try out. It's worth doing that. And finally, this little trash thing down here gives a kind of a distorted feel to it, just to make it a little bit warmer. I'll just play this back under, let's say, the default settings. I'll try the trash setting and adjust that as we go along.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty.
The difference is pretty subtle, but it just kind of adds a little bit of warmth as you get toward the high end there. Let's switch over to the stereo signal. So I'll go back to the 4 voices and look at analog delay for this one. Turn off the delay, make sure we don't have them beating up on each other. And it's very similar, but this lets you spread the sound to give it a greater kind of stereo feel to it. So I'll try to change the spread as we go along here and see how that sounds.
You're just too hard to find. Just too hard to find. Just too hard to find.
Just gives it a little more breadth as you spread it out to 200 like that as opposed to 0. So that's the analog delay. Let's move on to the echo effect. Go back to our monaural channel thing here and go back to echo. I've got a bunch of silence there now, so that's why there's that big space there. Remember that? Click on echo, turn off the analog delay. Echo is like one step up from delay. Delay, remember, was delay time and echo level or mix. Echo level is like mix, dry and wet. Then here's that feedback, which lets you determine how much decay happens with each repeat. So this is just essentially the analog delay without a lot of features to it. It just lets you determine how much feedback is going to happen as you go down the line. But the cool feature that's in here that's not inside analog delay is the successive echo equalization. This allows you to determine, what the pitch will be for the returning sound. Typically, echoes tend to be kind of trebly. They tend to be up here someplace. I'll just raise these guys a little bit, and this would be a typical echo.
Fourscore and 7 years ago, our father.
The echo tends to be toward the treble end. I kind of overdid it there just a bit, but that's how that works. If you tend to have a bass echo coming back, it can be really muddy. Just to be aware, echoes tend to not have much of a bass response.
Fourscore and 7 years ago.
So you can see how that just gets absolutely awful. But you can decide how you want the pitches to decay. You can make, let's say, the top end pitch decay faster and more toward the mid-range decay a little bit slower. So you do have this option of doing the equalization here on the returns of the delays when you make the echoes. Let's go to the stereo side and open up the echo for that one. What's cool about when you work on the stereo side with the echo effect is that you can do what's called echo bounce. You can bounce the echo back and forth, left and right. And I think that's a really cool feature. The rest of these guys I think you can probably figure out. But I'm going to go and work with echo bounce. And when you work with echo bounce, you typically want to have the echo level, what percentage wet and dry, from one channel to be 100%. And then you want the echo level for the other channel to be nothing. So that's the best way to do it. Let me just move this guy over to the side so I can get started. Here we go.
Just too hard to find.
Cool. And then we've got 63%. That's pretty high. I'm going to drop that down so it's not quite so obvious. We'll try this one again.
Just too hard to find.
And we'll probably bring the delay down a little bit so it's not such a long delay between the two. Here we go.
You're just too hard to find.
There you go. So the cool thing with the echo effect over here inside the stereo side is that you do have this option to do echo bounce. So those are the echo and delay effects inside Audition.